hopefully the first of many episodes of PR School. And basically, I just want to talk to you about your company and offer whatever suggestions I can make about improving your media visibility and turning that into investment and business and sales opportunities. So I realize that you and I have chatted briefly in advance, but why don't you talk to folks about who you are and what you're doing around esports with your startup?
Yeah, so thank you, Bill. It's kind of fun to be first, but also recognizing that comes with bumps and hiccups.
Absolutely.
Yeah, my name is Zachary Rozga. I'm the founder and CEO of THECE. And, in a short summary sentence, we are bringing a new media focused buying mechanism for brands to get exposure to gaming and esports audiences. And for people who are of my age and possibly yours, who do not recognize how gigantic the media opportunity is in the esports and gaming landscape, there's some estimates that 30% of 18 to 34-year-olds media diet is spent inside of gaming. And that's not them sitting and playing games. It's mostly them sitting and watching others play games.
Yeah.
And so, you compare that to the media diet that they have on quote unquote network television, which is down less than single digits. There's obviously a need for brands to shift their spend to these new mediums.
That sounds great. Now, when did you folks get started, and how has your trajectory been thus far?
So we're not your typical startup, I would say. So it's not like we came together, we saw a problem, and we decided to go solve it, and we're into month 6. We actually started in 2016, and we started off with a software product that it's a platform that we own. And we originally started off tackling what we thought was going to be a more urgent issue than it actually has been, which is the post-cookie world that's coming in the advertising space. We saw that this was coming with GDPR in 2016, 2017. And so we started building a tool that was for brands and advertisers to engage with audiences when the cookie was no longer, able to do all the awesome things that it can do with tracking. And so, we'd built this second screen platform that allowed for our product to spin off of QR codes. And we were doing a lot of work pre-COVID in real life. So IRL marketing, brand activations at sporting events, etc. And then COVID happened, and that business basically went to zero. There were no sporting events, there were no music festivals, and that's where most of our clients were using our platform. So as all good startup people and small businesses, we did what we could to survive. And we, through, I think, partially hard work, but also partially market demand, we found an opportunity in the gaming landscape, and in esports and gaming. And it came through an opportunity I had to have a customer that was eSports Insider when we were doing a lot of business in virtual conferences. So right when coronavirus happened, we started powering some virtual conferences to drive higher levels of engagement at those virtual conferences. Our platform wasn't a specific use case for that, but it was a good use case for some of those things. And particularly at the very beginning of the coronavirus pandemic, when people didn't know what was going on. They were making these immediate shifts from in-person summits to virtual summits. And when I got involved in that, I was asked to be interviewed. Well, I got a chance to talk directly to the CEO of eSports Insider.
Yep.
And I told him that there was a couple things that happened to us that related to esports. And I basically said, I think esports is kind of full of it. And in terms of the way they participate and work with brands, that the numbers that we were shared with a project that we tried to work on in May were fairy dust. Like, they just weren't realistic. They weren't packaged for us in a way that we could take it to brands in a media construct. It was a sponsorship fulfillment, and like the numbers we knew were just no way we could justify the buy that they were asking for. And in Sam's, his, what's the word I'm thinking of? Well, in his foresight, he didn't tell me, well, you're crazy. Like, don't tell me these negative things. He actually said, tell me more. And it started a conversation with him. And he actually asked me if I would run a panel at their digital summer. And it was a panel on monetization of esports, where I got to actually moderate 5 different components of the esports category. So it was, the teams, there was the influencers, there was platform, and then there was sort of the brand side sponsor. And it was through that interaction that I realized there's nobody that I had met that understood the concepts of media math working in esports, which then immediately rang bells to me that said, oh my God, there's an opportunity here. And so I wrote an article about how esports was missing out on $800 million a year in brand spend, which was an estimate that we kind of came up with back of napkin math. Turns out they're missing out on billions of dollars of brand spend, because they have a coveted audience, but they haven't formulated the way that they want to interact with brands in a way that the brands want to work with them. And so lucky for us, another component or cog in the wheel of the esports infrastructure machine was sort of on that same path as we were, but they did not come from the media sales side. And so they asked us if we could partner with them, where we are sort of the front end, the pointing end of the stick, going and talking to the brands, and they would be more of the back end and managing and dealing with the for lack of a better term, the content creators. Yeah. And so it was actually a really great match. And so we came to an agreement only in the end of October, and rushed it out to market for the end of 2020 to really get it into the buying cycles for 2021, which is kind of where we sit right now at the end of December. Is we've got a fairly robust pipeline of major brands with major agencies looking to do some significant testing with us in Q1 of next year.
Now, without giving away those names, could you at least say what kind of companies they are, like consumer, consumer packaged goods?
Typical usual suspects when it comes to QSR, packaged goods. I think there's one financial services company in there, but it's primarily the same people that are spending on network TV. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, but I mean, it's the same reason that Coca-Cola, for instance, that advertises everywhere. They want to reach people where they are, So, maybe young folks are not watching, or, Generation Z folks are not watching linear TV. They're on Twitch, or whatever. Now, since we're looking at the new year here, and it sounds like you have some really exciting things in the pipeline, let's talk about execution and deployment from a media standpoint. Are these all Q1 engagements, Q2? How are they lining up exactly?
Well, I'd like to think they're going to be Q1 engagements, but it really depends on how tight-fisted the money managers are at these brands and agencies around coronavirus. I mean, like, that's the big elephant in the room. I mean, the conversations we've had is people wanted to test us immediately. Like, when they saw this, they were like, oh my God, you guys have an option to spend a media buy in esports that's anywhere from 10 to 20% cheaper than Twitch. 90 to, so if Twitch is $25 CPM, we're $250 CPM. So it's a 10% spend.
Yep.
But the problem is that with the uncertainty around the election, the uncertainty around the coronavirus, and in particular, if there's going to be an effective vaccine, how quickly that vaccine is going to roll out, essentially everybody said we can't do anything in Q4. There's nothing. So let's talk Q1. And, I think some of those issues have been resolved, but not all of them. I mean, the vaccine is not getting out the way that it was supposed to. It's really uncertain whether the dollars that are going to come through that last piece of legislation are going to be deployed. I mean, and so does that mean that brands are going to start spending in advance of all this happening so that they're getting out in front? So when the tidal wave of spending occurs in Q2, they're in front of it? Or are they going to wait till Q2? I don't think, if there's somebody out there that you've talked to that knows the answer to that, they're either an oracle or they're full of crap. That's kind of been, because we've talked to people like, oh, we know Q1's going to be hot and it's going to roll. And we're like, but is it? So there is a couple of projects that are time sensitive that we're involved in that actually have to execute in January, but we don't have anywhere. I would say we got like a 60% certainty we're going to be involved. So that's what we're seeing.
Yeah.
But for us, time to execution from a brand perspective is, if a brand said, I want to do this right now, if they had creative, and they had an idea of like genre matching, like what games do they want to be associated with, we could get into market in 48 hours. What takes a little bit of time is actually getting the creative right for the audience. That's often where there's been missteps by brands, and very well documented and media peppered, swings and misses in esports and gaming by big brands. So that's where there is a little bit of a lag, which is like, okay, we know there's an audience there. We know we want to be a part of that audience, but what are we actually going to get in front of that audience so that it's not another egg on our face type of activation?
Yeah, I mean, because you can get the tone so wrong and fail so extraordinarily with gamers. Because, you could be, trying to put your creative leaning into something like, a massive multiplayer or, like a shooter audience. And then the people you're actually reaching are the Animal Crossing people, So it's like this huge, like, disparity between the tone of the creative and the intended audience.
Well, I think the blessing and the curse of the medium that we're working in is it's highly, highly engaged audience.
Oh yeah.
And it's live streamed. And so that means that if somebody who's in the audience does not like whatever that brand is doing, and I think, there's a couple of them. I think Burger King got a bad review. I think Dr. Pepper did. I don't remember who it was, but there's been a couple. And it's because the audience basically in real time said, what the hell are you doing? Quit coming into my feed, get out of here. And then all of a sudden it just spread. And then it got into Reddit subthreads. And then it was like, within 12 hours, like the worst campaign of all time inside of esports, right? So
yeah,
I think that's where there is some hesitancy when it comes to the creative side of like, okay, look, where do we thread the needle so that we're doing things that benefit us as a brand, but are in line with what the audience wants as an offer or as an activation, etc. So, that's where it could be simple, but I think it could be simplified. Let's put it that way. It's not simple yet, but it could be simplified.
Understood. Now I realize that things are, almost by default, very uncertain at the moment. But what I would recommend to you is the following. First, rather than treat any one of these campaigns as, an end state, I would say think of them as a tent pole, right? So that rather than saying, okay, when it finally becomes real, we put together a press release and then we send it out to the usual, ad tech and ad trade and esports trade outlets. I would say to you, think of it more as a 360-degree value proposition. Think of it more as a tent pole, so that you have, say, a press release, then you have maybe some making of backstory that you can use for a case study, video testimonials, webinars with the client, when you have some feedback and input on the campaign, thought leadership pieces of your own that you can maybe, start developing now, so that when you do make your announcement, it helps promote the offering. It isn't like you're starting off from zero with your media engagement and your conversation.
Can I ask you a follow-up question to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, one of the things that I've been trying to ascertain is like, which are the publications of record or of note right now in the Q4 of 2020 in the marketing and advertising vertical? Because it feels like it's a little bit of it's kind of in flux. And like, is it important to go get into the sort of newsletter type of publications, or is it important to get into sort of the like bigger status publications like an Ad Age? Which do you think from your landscape is actually where you want to be at what stage?
I hope this doesn't sound like a cop-out, but I would say both. And I would say that there's a high and a low to things. So you can get yourself into a status publication, and that makes you and your company look very good, especially if you're doing a raise, right? Or if you're trying to get people into your funnel, and to legitimize what you were doing. Because it says, okay, here's company X, and they've been in Harvard Business Review, they've been in Fortune, they've been in Ad Age, that's very good. But I do feel from a practical standpoint, the hyper-specific outlets will give you that conversion that you're looking for, in terms of uptake and funnel. That I really feel like it's both, honestly.
Because I feel like there's a lot of energy that can go into the status, and it seems like it's not a certain value proposition for what
That's what I'm saying.
it. Yeah, it's like it's sometimes it's just purely prestige, but nothing comes of it, and
it's good for branding. It's good for your brand. It's good for your brand, but there's no real conversion.
Yeah.
Because, all right, so say you're doing an eSports campaign with Coca-Cola, it gets covered in, the ad page of the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or Ad Age or whatever. Looks great. Everybody, feels very vindicated. But actually, the person that needs to say yes isn't reading any of those publications.
Right. Yep. Yeah, because I mean, as a startup, you are running at kind of 3 or 4 different things all at the same time. One is getting customers on board, and that I think as somebody who's been looking at seed stage funding for some time, particularly in the ad tech space, if you don't have solid revenue, there's just not seed funding out there for pre-revenue companies, and so it's but then getting into those hyper specific focused newsletters or web magazines, for lack of a better term, is not going to get you that prestige that the investors are looking for, because they don't look at those. Like it's
that's right. It's about filling out your media credentials so that you're able to have different conversations with different audiences.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, you've been in the Wall Street Journal, TechCrunch, Fortune, Ad Age, all of these ring bells for the investors. Then, another cohort of people that you need to contact. Well, they're reading, Game Daily Biz. They're reading Gamma Sutra. That's their daily bread and butter. They're reading The Drum, And that's what resonates for them. So that's why I say, you know, when you're thinking about talking about yourselves, start now and try to have as broad a conversation with, you know, the widest possible area, the widest possible array of constituents, so that you're able to switch back and forth, and put on different hats. So like when you go to the website, for instance, it's almost like, you know, it's like, okay, media buyers go here, brand people go here, game folks go here, so that you're kind of threading things around different interests. And similarly, I feel like you should have a multivalent media strategy, so that you're having these concurrent conversations with all these different groups, so that it isn't just, okay, wait a minute now, I need to put on my, you know, my brand manager hat, or I need to put on my eSports hat. You know, I feel like that's one of the ways, you know, you could think about developing what you're doing. Another thing is, you know, if you're waiting on these big campaigns to happen, another thing you can do is maybe some small hurdle effort, something in the immediate where you can show really good, you know, turnaround
Yeah,
for the brand.
we actually tried to do some of those small immediate turnarounds. The problem is, and there is some issues with the inventory. It's not perfect inventory and it's not digital inventory, which is we don't have geo targeting. And so without geo targeting, you really have to be looking for pervasive always on brands. Pervasive always on brands only spend big checks and only go through big RFP type processes. We've tried to sell this to some smaller endemic brands, and the problem is for them is that they don't have a lot of budget, and that leakage that comes from not having the ability to do sort of geo targeting, or you know, essentially prevents them from, and they're already spending a bunch of money in the space anyway. So they're already the core sponsor of XYZ team. So they're already exposed, and we're not creating enough efficiency for them at the sort of at their ability to buy that. So, I mean, like that was part of our go to market strategy in October is, okay, we know we have something on our hands that's just massive. Can we get small runs on the board while we're building up these big campaigns? And we tried. I mean, we ran at it hard at both the big brands and through the mega agencies and small. A small consumer product company will not, period, because they're in the acquisition game, and this is not guaranteed acquisition. This is really eyeballs and exposure. And so we did a lot of digging on the ideal customer, and we realized it's either always on brands or endemics, and the endemics just don't have enough money to be able to sprinkle it around. And then vice versa, the big brands don't do minor testing. They either go all in.
Right.
And so like a test with like a minor brand is like a $50,000 buy. Whereas that's, you know, most endemics can spend like $1,500. And so there's, you know, for regular advertising that's in digital, like programmatic, you got an array that fits the entire span there.
Yeah.
But as we go to market with this inventory, we just don't have that. It's not until we've had, you know, let's say 25 campaigns that we can start to actually figure out how to decipher that middle market. So we've just come to that realization by trying. I mean, we tried really hard. It wasn't like we just said, oh, we're just going to go for big brands. No, I mean, we tried to do it all. And some of it's been helpful that we have a lot of really high level agency relationships, and agencies that manage big and small brands. And the number one issue that we continuously came up against was, even in a network television, linear television world, you have the ability to do geo-targeting. And so you can do like smaller regional brands, like regional QSRs. We just can't do that. I mean, like one of the tests that we ran, we don't even really have geo visibility on the view. We have geo visibility on the conversions. And then you can sort of try to do that by proxy to figure out what the actual like audience geolocation was. Well,
Yeah.
50% of the conversions came from North America. Hey, that's great, right? 50% of your audience was North America. The rest of the 50% was spread over 60 countries. And that's just never been done before. Like that's part of like this is part of the problem that esports has in general. Like this is the I mean, there were like one person participated from Myanmar, one person participated from Lesotho. And I'm not kidding you. Like we saw those names in our geostats. And so, you know, you have to be a brand that's willing to accept that leakage to be in front of that audience. And that's not a small business. Like that's not even a medium-sized business. You got to be a big brand that, like you said, is the always on brand that wants that prestige of being associated with it. And we know there's plenty of them out there. And that's also why we're going to have CPM compression for some period of time. But, you know, once we've run enough pilots, we'll be able to ascertain from some reverse analytics, like what your audience actually, what your makeup is. We might be able to come up with day parting so that we know that there's, okay, if we run this with teams that are only playing in the Asian time zone between, you know, 6:30 and midnight, you'll get a majority of Asian audience. Like we think that might be the case. Well, but we can't do that until we've run several big brands. I do have to go pretty soon.
No, that I have one last question, and then I'll let you.
I was gonna say,
you
one of
go.
the really interesting is most of the RFPs we have coming are not coming from North America.
Well, there you go.
I think we're gonna go to market much faster and maybe even bigger in Asia. Like right now, most of the RFPs that we have where we think we'll close, there's one that's in North America and there's 9 in Asia.
Hey, wherever the party is, you're going to go there.
Yeah.
So here's a thought that I have. So, you know, in absence of having a case study that you can really kind of, you know, leverage into different opportunities, the other thing I would say to you in terms of like establishing a media presence, I would say also maybe you should form some type of brand council, some type of advisory board, because I go to your site and I read your materials and it sounds great, but there is the absence of the brand presence.
Yeah.
And maybe what you could do is get some testimonials, get some sustained engagement, and so on by forming some kind of a brand advisory council for esports.
I appreciate that piece of advice. That's come up a couple of times. We haven't actually come up with a plan on how to do that yet. That's something that I think we need to do, because we know there's massive intrigue, there's massive interest, but there's also hesitation and issues. And so, yeah, no, I mean, I appreciate that as it's come up and we haven't paid, it's not, I think we haven't put enough attention towards it because we haven't really thought about how we would do it right now.
Yeah.
But I think we're getting close enough with some of the both agency and direct to brand where we're past like that sort of like initial like what it is phase to like, okay, how would we use it? I think we're getting there. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, and this is the last thing I'll say before I let you go, and it's really been great talking to you. The metric or the use case of working with reporters is it's a very credentialist mindset.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, if you look at a story on the Wall Street Journal or Ad Age or whatever, it has very common elements. It's like, okay, what's the brand story? What's, you know, what are the backgrounds of the founders? What's the size of the market? So anything that you can do to add to your current offering and to validate it with brands in the here and now will help you with sales, and obviously it will help you with media. You know, the major failing that I see with a lot of technology companies is that they just they lead with their feature set. It's like, oh, we have a new XYZ thing and here are all the features and they kill you with bullets. People
Yeah.
don't want to hear that. People want to hear, they want to hear first party stories, in this case, brand stories about how they've been helped. And they want to hear real, honest stuff. They don't want to hear BS, you know, and they want to hear good news and they want this good news to be real. And I feel like that should be the central goal of everything that you're doing here, to get to that story so that you can put the brand forward and have them talk about how you solved their problems and found new opportunities for them in terms of revenue.
Yep. Yeah, no, I think the thing that you just said is, because we're a dual-sided marketplace where we have to have the partners who are the content creators and we have to have the brands. I think we've been spending a lot of time and a lot of our language on the content creators, the people who are actually, you know, like, how does it work with them? How do you interact with them? Not necessarily on the brand side of like, you know, how do they work with you? Right? Like, and what's in it for
Yeah.
you as a brand? So I do have to go. This has been great.
Yeah.
And
Thank you so much for talking today, Zachary. This has been an interesting conversation, and thank you so much. And I'll be back again soon with more PR School.